This is like golf. Golf is the most complex game I've ever played in my life. And I think it's complex in terms of there's so much we don't know, but it's simple in terms of there's such great, simple things that we've been talking about during this meeting that make such a start, such a difference that isn't complex. It's the complexity is stopping yourself from doing things, maybe in a more traditional way, and just where do I start? How do I start? What do I do? Where do you start?
From wherever we are, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia, recognising their continuing connection to this land, its waterways, the stars in the skies since time immemorial. We pay our respects to the elders, knowledge holders, and to all the generations of First Nations peoples who have nurtured their unceded sovereign lands for over 80,000 years and continue to do so today.
G'day, I'm your host Charlie Arnott, an 8th generational Australian regenerative farmer. And in this podcast series, I'll be diving deep and exploring my guests' unique perspectives on the world so you can apply their experience and knowledge to cultivate your own transition to a more regenerative way of life.
Welcome to the Regenerative Journey with your host Charlie Arnott.
G'day, welcome back to the Regenerative Journey. This week, hang on, you might hear in my office a few blowflies flying around. I'm sorry about that. I made the mistake of opening the door and leaving it open for a bit of air. And of course, with the lights on, they're in, even though it is about 9 o'clock in the morning, 9:30. Anyway, stupid shit. I have, so for those who don't know how to get rid of blowflies, just turn the lights out, make it darker where you are than somewhere else, and I'll go. This week, Peter Challendar, who's a new farmer, member of the Highland Beef team. Peter is a lovely bloke. We'll get to him in a minute. Before I do bang on about Peter and his role or his sort of new part of the Highland Beef team, I did put the call out a few weeks ago, excuse me, for people who had been, I guess, inspired by guests of the Regenerative Journey, and I was just wanted to sort of scope out, how that was impacting people's lives generally, and a number of you, quite a few of you actually got in touch and let me know how it had impacted your lives, your family's lives, your business or whatever. So this one's from Jake Chandler, who, lovely bloke. I've sort of known Jake for, I reckon it's 3 years now, and I've been watching his and experiencing his transformation over those few years, and it was lovely to be reminded when I did poke him the other day, and I said, mate, you've got a pretty interesting sort of journey you've been on. Could you let me know how that feels? Well, what might have inspired you, and if the podcast did in any way. Anyway, he's got back to me. Here's a few things I've done thanks to your podcast and persistent request for flattery. Jake. Biodynamic workshop. He's done that. No doubt listen to Hamish Mackay's interview back in season 2, I think it was. Natural sequence farming. He's been here for one of our courses with Peter and Stuart Andrews. So he's done that. Got Tommy Herschel to Young. I was at that a few months ago. It was fantastic, and there at the Young Yabbies Rugby Union Club. And great chat with Tommy. Tommy was, I think, in season 2 or 3, Tommy Herschel. Drank the best gin ever made by Rose Kentish. Okay. Rose was probably season 5, I think it was. It was down there in South Australia last year. Started seeing a naturopath, Stacey Curcio, who is Terry McCosker's daughter. And that may have been partly inspired by Terry's interview, or just general bang on about RCS. Now do regular blood tests, making thoughtful decisions as a consumer, and giving a fuck about where my food comes from. Most importantly, has continuously encouraged me to slow down and be conscious of my own life. Case in point, melanoma diagnosis March 2023. I chose no chemical treatment for stage 3B cancer post-surgical removal and have clear PET scans so far. That's awesome. However, I did change everything else about my life, including diet, sobriety, counselling, and sought alternative advice. I took control and didn't accept mainstream advice that was 1 year of monthly, which was 1 year of monthly immunotherapy injections. Mate, that's great. I'm so thrilled that you have been inspired by and put into action a lot of those things and on the back of those interviews, and more importantly that, mate, you've got through that, or you progressed so far through that health scare. Can't wait for the Hanamino tour. And he's also added there, I forgot to mention Vedic meditation with Nico Plowman, and I'd also probably say Landmark. I know Jake did Landmark. It'll be last year, I think it was. And I know how much that's changed Jake's life. And I've done Landmark, and I do reference it quite a bit, in episodes. And also, funnily enough, or coincidentally, a lot of my guests have done it as well. There's probably a few guests that we didn't even touch on, so I may have actually done it. I just sort of got a hint, a whiff of Landmarkian speak, which is great along the way, but we didn't sort of go there. So that's great. And look, Jake, really appreciate you sharing that with me. And now all of the listeners. So if anyone else got any sort of wonderful feedback, it doesn't have to be wonderful, just some, if you've been inspired and think that, life-changing kind of episodes that our guests had, some information, some inspiration they'd given you, it'd be lovely to hear from you. That would be fantastic, please. Probably should interview Peter Challendar. He's a lovely bloke. He played a lot of rugby actually in his day. Couldn't quite tell from the video Zoom we did there, but quite a large man, tall and no doubt I'm sure he was a raging forward in rugby union back in his day. Played club rugby in Sydney. He also was international business exploits and adventures along the way before he settled back to Wagga, which is sort of essentially where he grew up. In that area, back to his community, his people, bought a farm and has been on his own regenerative journey over the last few years, implementing quite a few different practices, natural sequence farming, rotational grazing, his fencing and putting water in and all sorts of things. So really, it's just another example of, I guess, the application of principles. He's west of Wagga. It's not particularly it's not particularly challenging landscape, but it's not sort of like, Southern Highlands of New South Wales, it rains every other day. Having said that, might be a bit dry at the moment, but, just another example of how these principles can be applied in any environment you're in. That's the point I'm trying to make. And Peter's done that in spades. He's really enthusiastic. He's loving the fact we did dig into sort of why he's there. He probably could have done a lot of different things, and he's got his wife and he's they've decided that that's their home, and just lovely that he's been inspired enough to move on from, I guess, and change his career path and enjoying his life on a farm, practicing regenerative agriculture and doing a great job from what I understand. Now a new member of the Highland Beef team. Lovely cattle, and just to make a note that Peter often referred to in the interview Muddamar, he actually meant to refer to Maloon Creek, which is where Peter Andrews had done a lot of work in the Maloon Creek with his natural sequence farming. So just to be clear, Peter's actually referring to Maloon Creek in those instances. This was amazing, lovely chat on the Zoom as one of our last Highland Beef in-between episodes for the Regenerative Journey. Well, g'day. Welcome back to the Regenerative Journey, to our fourth Highland Beef special in-between episode. And I have to make sure I pronounce your name. I stumbled over it a couple of times, Peter. Peter Challendar. It's not Chandler. That's it. So welcome to this special episode, and welcome back to Murray Richardson.
Thanks, Charlie.
We've done the three, and this is our fourth. Had a lot of fun too. Murray and I were just chatting offline there, Peter, reflecting on a couple of the things that have come up in previous ones, little topics of this and that, and I've been really enjoying these very sort of frank and open conversations with some of the farmers, some of the people involved with Highland Beef. So, Peter, welcome.
Thank you.
Peter, you're, well, pretty new. You're as fresh as can be to the program, from what I understand. Do you want to just let us know, before we dig into that, you just want to give us a bit of a brief background on, who you are and why you're, how you got to sort of be, involved with Highland Beef to this point?
Sure. So I had a corporate background. I've known Murray for many years. In fact, I don't want to add it up. That'll age us too much. But did the corporate thing, including domestic and overseas, and at a point in time got way too cranky to be able to keep doing that. So finally went back to my first love, which was always farming. I didn't grow up on the land. My mum was from off the land out of Bogan Gate, and as a toddler and all the way through my teens, I used to go out there and look after that farm and give my uncles and grandfather a break. And from there, I guess my love grew, and my father was extremely interested in the land as well, but didn't grow up on it. They bought a property at Grenfell. We bought our first property, my wife and I, at Warringah, which is at that time was population 11, sort of in a triangle between Grenfell, Forbes and West Wyalong, wheat belt. Did traditional farming at that stage, but I was still doing the corporate thing. Anyway, I had other properties, had a property in Yass, predominantly sheep, a little bit of beef, again, doing things fairly traditionally. And then finally we bought out here in Aura, near Wagga. And this is where we've set up and are doing our regenerative work, I guess. The interest came because we're never going to have a particularly large plot of land. We've got about 900 acres here. Didn't make a lot of sense to keep going with things like the high input costs of the synthetics, chemicals, fertiliser, etc. Started to sort of look around, do a lot more reading. Got on to Gabe Brown's books, Dirt to Soil, read that cover to cover, absolutely loved it. It all just made sense. Also read Peter Andrews' book, then subsequently did Peter Andrews' course, predominantly because I was very interested in the hydrology side of it, I guess, as much as anything. And sort of the combination of those things and a chat with my wife, the opportunity came up to buy this property we're on now 4 years ago. We did that, but we did that at the time where we bought it at the end of the last drought, and we needed basically to persuade each other that this is what we wanted to do and we could do it, and how were we going to protect ourselves to some degree against those vagaries of nature and climate change. So really through the start of that journey and principally Gabe and Peter and their teachings, and then many more people in our research, we said no, we will do it because we think we can do it in a regenerative way and have a model that is sustainable despite all those challenges.
That's fantastic. So you rattled off some names there that are pretty embedded in the beginnings of regenerative agriculture as it currently is in Australia and overseas. Gabe Brown, Peter Andrews. Have you tried some pasture cropping? Have you done a bit of or multi-species?
Yes, yeah.
Gabe Brown style? Yeah,
absolutely. So not just Gabe too. I mean, there's so many other names. I'm just trying to remember the fellow that Gabe often quotes out here. I think he's up around your way, Charlie, who does a lot of pasture cropping.
Cole Sykes, Bruce Maynard.
Yes, Cole Sykes. Anyway, we do. We do pasture cropping. We do cover cropping. We've been trying. This block we've got here has about half of it, if you like, is an old floodplain. It's traditionally grown, a monoculture lucerne of one variety or of another over the last probably 30, 40 years. Out of that, when we got it, very old stand, probably, lucerne cover would be likely to be 20 to 30%, but still sort of treated in that way. So in summer, it's basically lucerne, a bit of whatever else can hang on there with it, and a very hard pan. So we've been doing some basically some pasture cropping and cover cropping work, but predominantly with a whole heap of mixtures that we got from through Vic No-Till and Sims Grant.
Sims,
and his wife, some great gear, but trying to overcome what we were seeing, which was not just the pan, but pretty unproductive, barley grasses and those sort of things that would fall away and then prove a problem come summer. When we started our journey, we were making some mistakes. We put in those multi-species mixes, and then I thought, no, look, what I need is something like a taproot, which is going to break up that ground. And so, I'd put in mixes that had turnip and radish. You'd get all excited when you saw them grow. Then you'd have a lovely big fat tuber showing itself on top of the soil. You'd go to dig that out, and it'd be about 2 inches long, and this stubby little root system trying to do something else. And I thought, well, look, I'm not getting there with that. Tried forage canola, a few other things. And then I sent an email to Gabe, who responded that he retired and he doesn't really sort of do that thing anymore, but how about we have a phone chat? Well, Zoom. Couldn't believe it, got him on board, and then he said, well, look, what you need to do is to run with more grasses, get some finer roots going. They'll do the work for you. They'll challenge everything else that's there and work it on that principle for a couple of years till you start to see some results, which already we're seeing after a couple of years. We're seeing that pan. I could barely get the shovel in, an inch and a half. Out there the other day, going down about 5 inches. That fine root zone is going all the way down with that. Starting to see some of the sort of properties you want to see in the soil. We're a long way off where we need to be, but those things are happening.
That's fantastic. And that's what do you got on there? You've got cattle, and we'll get to sort of the Highland Beef involvement there in a minute. Have you got sheep as well, or are you just keeping it simple with the ones?
Yeah, we've got principally we've had sheep and cattle, Charlie. The sheep, fortunately for me, pre this latest sort of price drop, everything's in a bit of free fall, but we actually got rid of pretty well all of our sheep because I couldn't look after them whilst I was building the homestead we're building out here at the moment. So cattle were a much easier proposition, and I wanted to start to get into high impact grazing. So we're pretty well just the cattle at the moment, but we want to have that diversity of animals as much as we want in plants in due course. But that's the reason why we're principally cattle at the moment.
Murray, jump in there if you've got a question.
No, I'm enjoying the journey. Pete, one of the things you talked to me about was
and I suppose you've just started to sort of touch on it, is trying to get, you obviously, you've had a number of years that you're really starting to get a footing, and you're wanting to move towards a real diversity of income streams is one of the things we talked about. And obviously, different animal species will give you that to some degree. Where else are you planning to go, or have you got other thoughts on that? I mean, you're in a butte area down there. There's plenty of people about.
Yeah, it's well, we want to centre the majority of those efforts on the farm. So with my newfound handiness post-corporate,
right,
as in I can build things now, we're looking at the potential, albeit we're late to the party, but the potential of farm stays on the property to provide a cash flow, which takes some of the pressure off other areas of what we're trying to do in terms of the farm improvement. So we'll be looking to do that. We're sort of in design phase. Andy has picked out, several sites that will work well for us. We deliberately bought this property with those sort of things in mind. In actual fact, properties we've had before, such as at Yass, we tend to, where we can, we're lucky enough to have bought only sort of 15 minutes out of town. So in part, if you like, it's part of a property play to give that diversity and that opportunity for that cash flow. And then from the back of that, really all sorts of things could potentially take off. We said to the kids, look, they're in the process of looking at what they're doing, getting into their first homes, trying to sort of get that nest egg going. We've said to them, with the concept of a trust, that they're more than welcome to do things here on the farm, including potentially coming to some of those ventures with us. The land is free, if that's something that appeals to them. Yeah. And then on the farming side, well, I'd like to think that we can continue to try and diversify, income from that side of it, whether it's beef, sheep, goats, miniature cattle. It doesn't really matter. I don't have any baggage. I wasn't born and raised on the land, which I think is a bit of a bonus. So whatever makes sense, but also makes sense, I guess, around the rules that we're trying to incorporate around the regenerative agricultural journey and improving our soils and getting that diversity and getting that hydrology going, all those things, as long as all works in together, then we're open to what we might do. And I guess I haven't answered one question that Charlie posed a little bit earlier, which is why then Highland Beef? Well, Highland Beef, when we got to talking, Murray, at the night in Cootamundra, and I didn't realise that's where you were at the time, I'd done a little bit of work with another company, Greenham, which would be, well known to you in terms of backgrounding some stock.
Yeah.
But your model appeals to me highly because it releases cash flow for us to look at these other ventures. If I haven't got, a couple of $100,000 tied up in stock that I can put into other things to get them going sooner rather than later, then that's a great way to do things. But also, I need your stock to help me keep improving my country.
Yeah, that's right.
Keep those cattle doing what they're doing, which is, fertilising my country, pushing that carbon into the ground, making my large-scale veggie patches work.
Yeah.
And it's all very exciting watching it happen.
Peter, one of the things that when we first started chatting and once we sort of caught up again, it sort of indicated that you were really surprised how quickly things changed or responded on the property when you got going. And it's sort of interesting in that, I mean, Charlie interviewed one of our farms a couple of weeks ago for the podcast series, and he's been consistently one of our better sort of providers of cattle. This fellow, he's out at Upper Horton, and he's always just described himself to me as a natural farmer, and we have terrific conversations about what he's doing, and he's just got this terrific way of relating to what's in front of him. Well, I think he has anyway. That's the way I sort of see what he says to me. And I was really taken by the fact that you could see things changing, and it seemed to me faster than you anticipated. Is that sort of right? And what do you what's been the main driver of it? Is it the hydrology? Is it the thing, because you've talked a fair bit about that to me, which is, and I've never really picked up on the hydrology side of things, always sort of focused on the pasture side, but you do need them both.
You do need them both, yeah. And that's something, I guess, when you start to go along with it, Joe, you need everything.
Yeah.
Just everything, but in harmony, if you like, with nature. It's a pretty simple formula. Would nature do that? No. Okay, well, I won't do that. But the hydrology piece, what it's done for us, so we've got the floodplain sort of country, which is probably about, and slopes, gentle slopes, be about half of the block. The other half of the block rises into reasonably steep production country, if you like, to use some older vernacular. The beauty of the hydrology part, and Pete Andrews, so I bought a grizzly blade and got out there and with my level and did all my levels up high and worked on the process of picking where I would run my dead level contours up and in the mountains and where I would dare to take the tractor. But the beauty of all of that is what it's meaning is it's pretty simple stuff. It's I'm keeping more water that rains on the property higher.
Yeah.
So it's about as simple as that, rather than it all racing down. Of course, if you're following regenerative principles and you've got really good ground cover, that's going to be your number one way of doing it. But certainly what those contours did was, with what I inherited, helped to keep and really spread out any decent falls that we had. The idea, these contours aren't very high. They're cut in a certain way. I won't get all technical with you, but the beauty of them is they're about 300, 400 high. If you have a big downfall, the idea is that they fill up and it just spills over the top.
Yep.
You've got a second cut with your contours below, and you make sure you throw your topsoil back over the top so they disappear. And when you get a lot of grass, you got to remember where they are. I found that out a couple of times. But they're not an eyesore. They just do this beautiful little job. The second cut below provides a positive pull for water that goes in underneath the contour and into the ground down below it. So really all it's doing is just making sure if you've got a decent downfall that's a little bit more than maybe what your pasture cover can handle, then that'll slow it down, spread it right out across all of your country. And then if you might have another contour below it, and I won't go into all of that, how you pick it, but there's ways that you do all of that if you follow the Andrews way. And so what that meant is also I put in lots of chains of ponds. So anywhere where I had a bit of an erosion concern, a gully, whatever else, I put chains of ponds. Dry hired a 26-ton excavator. Got up there in the hills, and they've become watering points for stock. So if you've had a bit of a rainfall, they won't be permanent. You're not trying to stop water, just trying to slow it down. But if you've had a bit of a decent fall, then stock are up there and they're drinking out of that. They don't have to go anywhere to get it. It actually helps when you're running your hot wires, because generally you're trying to do that back to a watering point. If you can't take water everywhere, I've run pipelines and done all of that, but you can't do it up in that high country. It's fantastic. So you get that opportunity. Okay, I can carve out whatever it might be, 8 hectares or something like that, and put in, 100 head of stock and get them to high impact graze in that area and then move them down rather than them self-selecting. So that piece has been fantastic. And then the grazing piece has been fantastic too. And back to your question about, well, what was I starting to see? Well, in the space of literally 10 months, 12 months, I was getting better growth rates, better coverage on the country, starting to see species that hadn't been around that farm for, and I'd asked around previous owners. I lived next to a previous owner that owned it, family owned it 2 times before me, about sort of 60, 70 years ago. And we've got these little funny looking ancient varieties of Phalaris, with a really small sort of feathery head, but it is Phalaris.
Right.
That's popping up out of nowhere. Red grass on one particular hill as well. It's taken off in a lot of areas, but warrego grass, I hadn't seen any of that. All of these grasses that are, that seed bed is there is just starting to pop up and do their thing. And ultimately that's where we're trying to go with a lot of our country is get those perennials that can, work hard for you in summer as well going, and then augment that with some of the cover cropping and, where we've got our lower country that can bear a little bit more, provide more diversity there. So that happened very, very quickly. And it was a combination of, probably a main combination, I think, of the grazing, number one, but also that hydrology work. And of course, so there's 4 main principles that Peter Andrews talks about, but one of them is, keep your stock out of those areas that they shouldn't be in. We've got a semi-permanent creek. In fact, it was a dry creek when we took over. It's rapidly become semi-permanent. That's happened really quickly. It's fabulous. Frogs, birds, all sorts of insects, everything, quail coming very quickly. But it was simply that the way the property was laid out, stock would come from the high country down through the creek, have to pass through the creek and either water there or to watering points the other side of the creek. And of course, that doesn't work. It was just incising the creek more and more and more.
Yeah.
When storms came from up in the higher country, it would race through at a rate of like an alarming rate of knots, and keep gouging it out and prove a problem. So we've electric fenced that out in the cheapest way we could possible. It's about it's not a big property. It's about 3.5 kilometres.
Yeah, okay.
Both sides. I decided I couldn't do a permanent fence. I didn't have the dough. So that's like star posts at 20 metres, 2 hot wires, a single earth and a barb.
Yeah.
Cheap and cheery, does the job.
Yeah.
Now all those creeks, they're amazing. We've been documenting the photos of all of this as we've gone, but it's been quick. It's been quick and fantastic. We're starting to get ponds in the creek, natural ponds that are forming, and again that natural habitats start to reform again for all sorts of animals, and we'll crash graze that on occasion, not right into the creek, but where it makes sense,
just to knock it over.
Yeah, just to knock it over and make sure that it's gets that benefit. But we've got a lot of I thought, we have to plant a lot more trees. We had giant red gums just falling over into the creek, their roots all exposed, and just with that little bit of fencing and that sort of common sense approach, we've got suckers all over the place. So I don't have to plant anything. They'll just do their own thing. It's fabulous. I'm not worried about it. I'm not letting them go feral everywhere. But, let nature take its course.
Yeah. Peter, was there one, like when I know you said you and Andy sort of had a look at the place and sort of said, are we up for this, or, is this what we want to do? But what was the, and obviously you've got a big, you've got to sort of, you've been there for a couple of years now, you've got to actually step out that plan. What was that first big aha moment that said, well, we just got to, this is where we want to go, or this is the way we want to do it? Obviously it's, and they will continue to have those, I assume, because you've got this ongoing, development of the farm. But particularly given where you'd come from,
Yeah, that's right. Comfort, big salary, all those sort of things, but not happy.
Okay.
So I'm happy as a pig in at the moment. Really it was, we're thinking about, where we might buy. And we've both been very, I guess, concerned about climate change and what the volatility of weather that brings. And so I guess in my head I was saying, well, look, I could go anywhere. I said, Dan, look, let's be chickens. Let's find the biggest and best rainfall country, and that's where we'll go. But that didn't suit us from the viewpoint of family, our friendship network, and all those sort of things, which is here around Arawagga. A lot of rugby was played down this way. Back to a conversation Charlie and I were having earlier, and we had a good network here already, and the kids weren't far away. So we found this place, but then we had to say, well, what if it becomes a dust bowl? We're going to have droughts, but are we going to have them more often? Or what if that creek looks a little bit of a problem at the moment? What if we get, 4 inches overnight and that just, rips the place right down the guts, that sort of thing. So, so we were looking at ways to, that might mitigate that and might mitigate our concern about the risk potentially of jumping in here and making a lot of mistakes and licking our wounds later. And so early on with that reading and that those courses with natural sequence farming, I was fascinated. I went to Munnamar, went over all those properties, look at all of that and how it was working, and you just have a look. You have a look at the country around it, and the farms around it, and that sort of Braidwood, Munnamar, those sort of reasonably safe historically, but can look pretty bloody rubbish in a hell of a hurry. When things get a little bit more onerous. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we think we've got the foolproof plan that, there's no drought that could never knock us over. Of course, that's not the case, or flood or whatever else. But, you look at the work that Peter and Stuart and then others did around that area. Try and remember the other fella's name. Charlie, help me again.
Martin Royds.
Thank you, Martin. Yeah. And looking at Martin's property and the Munnamar Creek aggregation, and your eyes don't lie. You've got a lot of diversity. You've got trees that are growing and healthy. We've even found, with our creek going, I mentioned some of the grasses, but we've got rush that's come up out of nowhere in pockets in the creek, helping us to filter it and slow it down. And we've got this really high, I call it a water cooch, probably wrong, but it's just gone ballistic, and it's filtering all the water and helping to slow it down. And those sort of things were what we saw at Munnamar. And then they were talking about rain cycles and looking at your own mini cycles. And And I thought, oh, really, but I think it's true. I think that they were saying, I think in their recordings, that they've got to the better part of 100 millimetres of additional dew contribution.
Precipitation over a period. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Of any sort.
And I think we're starting to see that here too, and the reason I say it is not just like every farmer I've ever met is a bloody terrible driver. And I thought I was a reasonable driver, and I've become the worst because I'm going along the road and, geez, look, look at that, look at that. And you talk to friends, you talk to other farmers, traditional farmers as well and the like. We don't try and preach, the way it should be or what we're doing. But if anyone's half interested, we're more than happy to tell them. And we're seeing those sort of things where we seem to be getting just that little bit more rain. We seem to be getting that, that additional condensation. My boots are wetter for longer as I go and move each of those hot wires. And yeah, they're very simple things, but they're very real things, and they've happened. And that change has happened, I think, really quite quickly. Is it? Are we there yet? Hell no. We've got a long way to go. And there's so much we don't know. We are really babes in the woods.
Just Peter, and thank you for that. You're referencing a lot of, I guess, external factors that motivated you to buy the property and go the way you've gone in terms of, mitigating against climate change and sort of more localised, flooding or erosion, that sort of thing. So that what you've done is certainly satisfying those urges. Were there any sort of internal motivations for doing it? Was it to sort of have a healthier way of life? Was it a social, or not so much social, but was it, like a chemical free or a less chemical kind of environment? Were there sort of more internal, personal reasons for wanting to pretty much, heal that environment, the one that you are going to then live in?
Yeah, I guess, a lot of it, Charlie, can sound really cliche, but we want to leave this, this land that we've been lucky enough to look after for this period of our lives. We want to leave it in the best possible state we can for whomever takes that over, whether we're lucky enough for our children to become vested enough in that or whoever it is. But we want to leave it in a better place, in better condition, far more resilient, far more sustainable. That really matters to us. The soil piece and soil health is fascinating. The more I chip away there and do my little bit of reading, when the top, soil scientists and ecologists say they know less than 1% of what's really going on. I mean, that just blows me away. But how all that works and trying to get that working for us and in our favour is a real personal, motivation. Wanting to be successful, Charlie. I mean, successful. We're not doing this to not be profitable. We're doing this because I like my creature comforts. I'd like to go to the next Rugby World Cup. And all those good things, and I firmly believe, we did the RCS courses and others, and you it's not pure productivity, it's profitability, but I think you can have both. We're a long way from both, but certainly starting more down a profitable line makes good sense, and that's certainly a personal motivation as well. So it's a combination of all of those things. You mentioned chemicals. My grandfather, who introduced me to farming many years ago, he's long gone, but he had an aversion way back then, and I remember the blues he used to have with my uncles, and they won out the day, and I did the same things that they did. But I don't like putting on masks and gloves and trudging that stuff about. Doesn't mean I'll never use a chemical. No, might get shot for that. But if the bride doesn't want our 5 acre plot around the new homestead, absolutely infested with, cathead and the like, then she wins the day. So, I'll do that to start with, and then, we'll go. And Gabe says the same. He says, look, don't be an idiot. If you're starting to make this changeover and you're doing it, use fertiliser. But bring it down very rapidly to 50%, 30%, nothing. Use chemical if you need an intervention. Use it, but don't keep using it, because you'll have a big problem if you do.
Very interesting.
Yep, that's great. Well, you've got a lot of I guess, contributing factors that have led you to where you are now, and you wasted no time in implementing a lot of very standards is not the right word, I guess, foundational practices to crank up and start healing and ultimately lead you to improve productivity and profitability. So you've wasted no time at all. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I think I haven't done much, or we haven't done much in the space of added biology. And I think that's that's an area that fascinates me, where and how to start. I mean, I know suppliers and providers, and you talk around with other.
Talking about soil biology.
Sorry,
you're talking about soil biology, Pete. You mean?
Yeah, but brews, teas,
Yep.
all that territory, because I think that's that might help us speed up in some areas. That I'd like to speed up in, because Charlie was mentioning, that we've sort of done a lot of the foundational stuff and got into it pretty quickly. I think that's true, but I think that's probably a missing part of what we're doing. And there's a big part of me too. I'd love to get a few tanks and an aerator and start to muck around and do a bit of that myself. And get into that. But yeah, it's you can't all.
We've got a fantastic farm, and if you are interested in that, we've got a fantastic farm in Victoria that's doing some really interesting stuff in that space.
Oh, great! No, well, love to. That if you could give me an intro there, that'd be fantastic. And of course, Grant Sims and the Vic No-Till guys, they're pretty advanced in a lot of that down that way, and. It's just, again, sort of one foot in front of the other. It's manage. I'm trying to manage. What we've got is enough country to keep us in trouble, but also keep us out of trouble. And I think also someone asked me, because another block came up that we dearly would have loved to have bought, but I said to Andy, look, I'm not physically doing justice to what I've got so far. So how about we do that and drive all these good things out of that, and through that will come our increased profitability and by default productivity. And if we think we can look at each other in the eye and go, right, I think this place is humming, then maybe we could look at something else. But, makes no sense to.
Peter, one of the things that just sort of occurred to me, knowing a little bit about our sort of shared history, you've managed some pretty complex businesses. Have you managed a business as complex as this one before?
No, this is like golf. And golf is the most complex game I've ever played in my life.
Right.
And I think, it's complex in terms of there's so much we don't know.
Yeah.
But it's simple in terms of there's such great simple things that we've been talking about during this meeting that makes such a start, such a difference that isn't complex. It's the complexity is stopping yourself from doing things, maybe in a more traditional way, and just where do I start? How do I start? What do I do? We were lucky because, again, we didn't have the baggage, so we had the desire to go down there, down that route. But again, where do you start? And then this whole thing around, I remember the trickiest thing when I did natural sequence farming was they're not weeds. So I'm pretty sure there are some pretty nasty buggers. No, they're, anyway. And that whole understanding plant succession. And when you start to see that, it's just great. Yeah, I love it. I mean, I've started to see some Scotchies around the place. I'm absolutely bloody delighted. Because I'm moving on from saffron. And some other bits and pieces. So, I mean, all those things, it's complex, absolutely, but it's simple too. And you just got to let yourself go with the flow and enjoy some wins. Enjoy some wins, give yourself a pat on the back and go, well, it wasn't so hard. Keep going with it. And again, I'm not the guy. We live in a particular valley. I remember someone saying the other day that, they're on a main road and, they've got all sorts of nasties growing away and, what do they think of me? I don't worry about any of that. So I'm lucky.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, it's a business can be, the style of farming you're doing, Peter, can be complex because nature is a complex thing. It wants to move itself to complexity for lots of reasons, resilience, and just being able to handle everything, weather and seasons and human intervention and all sorts of stuff. But it doesn't have to be complicated, and that's where the humans come in and just like to complicate something that just wants to be complex. That's our it seems to be our job as humans generally. But if we can break that paradigm and keep it simple, that makes a huge difference. I'm just conscious of the time, Murray and Peter. Any other parting questions, Murray, for Peter before we let him get back to whatever he was chipping away at before we started?
No, Peter. Just thanks for your time. I really appreciate that. I mean, it's we're busily building a community along the eastern side of Australia, and sharing learning is proven to be a really great way of introducing people to what we're trying to do. So, no, really appreciate your time and your journey. And Tony Spear was down at the property last week, Charlie, and he said it's a terrific place. Looks fantastic. So, yeah, well done.
Thank you, guys. No, I really appreciate your time as well.
Good on you.
Just on that, Murray, before we go, while Peter's on, Will Mewburn we interviewed recently, he mentioned that they had a bit of a gathering of the Highland Beef members up north. That it might be time we had one down south, given that there's quite a collection of them, within a couple of hours of each other.
Yeah, no, that's a great suggestion, Charlie. In fact, we're trying to do more of them, but they are fantastic days because it's amazing what comes out of it. Just all these little gems, and I think increasingly where local land services and other groups used to do more and more of that stuff. I mean, as government resources have taken stuff away from those things, you need other reasons to get people together. So we certainly will. That's a great idea. Yeah, we might get you to coordinate that some stage down there. We'll have to see what's in your diary, Charlie.
Sure, no, that'd be fun. I have always said the most best use of my time as a farmer, or farmers I know, is gathering, in a paddock with a cup of tea, having a yarn, have some rough agenda, and just share stories and look at things, and get a shovel, and it's just they're the most beneficial days. So all for that for sure. Let's do it.
Good on you. Well, Peter, thank you so much.
Okay.
Really appreciate that, and we'll catch you soon.
Cheers,
Thanks,
guys.
Murray.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Charlie. See you. Bye-bye.
Good time.
And next week on the Regenerative Journey, my guest is Rachel Pomeroy. I caught up with Rachel at the Biodynamics New Zealand conference. It was in May this year, and I was asked by them to go over and speak, which is a wonderful experience, and even more wonderful that I got to sit with Rachel, who's a biodynamic legend guru. Her husband, Peter Proctor, was one of the, certainly a pioneer in New Zealand and dare I say in the world in farming and biodynamics, and what a lovely sit down I had with her at the conference in front of those attending with Rachel Pomeroy next week on the Regenerative Journey.
This podcast is produced by Rhys Jones at Jaeger Media. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to subscribe, share, rate and review. For more episode information, please head over to www.charliearnott.com.au.